That's stock.
That's stock. So it's got to have a shift kit in it.
Yeah.
From the factory. Something is.
It's a one-off valve body for the tranny for this car.
Is this the 4-speed?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the 200 R4?
Yep.
Hey guys, Brian from Wrenches and Rides, and I'm with Steve from Adrenalin Motorsports. Steve is a enthusiast. I'm going to call him an expert, but Steve is an enthusiast of Grand Nationals. We're going to walk you through some tips and tricks on if you're going to buy a new Grand National, or even if you have one. I'm sure there's something you could learn in this video. So first, to start out, Steve, what year did they make these Grand Nationals in? What did they stop in? What's important, what's not?
They started the Buick Grand National in the early 80s. 1982 was the first one they made. They made them up until 87. The 86 and the 87 are the ones that most collectors, modifiers, drag racers are after because of the intercooler on the turbo system. The intercooler has a split air dam on the front.
Okay.
A non-intercooled car will have a piece of vinyl, plastic, rubber, whatever you want to call it, a little spoiler that goes all the way across evenly. These have a duct in the middle where the intercooler sucks in cool air.
So starting out in 82, if someone has it, you know, it's the first year of something that's totally cool and different, is that a collector's item car too?
It is, but it doesn't carry the value that the 86, 87s and the GNXs carry. They only built, I think, 215 of the 82s.
Okay.
And they're
so,
a non-turbo V6.
So even with that low number, nobody cares? Everybody wants that intercooler.
The hardcore guys like me, I'd like to have one just to put next to this one. But
Okay.
it's not a necessity.
So what year is this car here?
1987.
So this is the last year they made them.
Yes.
Okay.
The last production year.
Last production year. This car is amazing, and you're going to look at it in some different areas, probably from this film or from other things, and say, well, wait a minute, but we're going to go through some of the interesting facts about this. So what's the first thing that somebody needs to look at when they're going to buy one?
Condition of the paint. The paint is the biggest thing.
So paint, and I've had a couple Monte Carlo SS's in my life, and my parents had a normal Monte Carlo, what is it, SL, CL, whatever those were. Nothing was great back then.
Correct.
And I look at these body lines and I see some of the exact same things that I seen in the Monte Carlo line.
That's how they were built in 87. They have terrible paint, and it's a well-known fact that they crack. The panel fit is not perfect, but you're looking for a car that is not perfect. You want to see orange peel. You want to see, you want to see kind of a transparent orange peel throughout the cars. A lot of the cars have had paint work on them. That's the biggest deterrent to me, because then I don't know what else has been done to the car. So I evaluate the car, first of all, by the paint.
And that totally makes sense, because if you're collecting a car, or if you're buying a car and you want one that's high-end, worth something someday, having the paint right is there. Now, I can remember the paint cracks. I can remember the burn spots in the black hoods where the white goes through. So obviously around these doors, it's normal to have a wider gap up top, closes a little bit, and then opens up. Same in the back. There was a rock guard that went along the bottom of these, so you're gonna see an intense, like, orange peel down there.
Yes.
And if that's gone, something's up.
Then it's been taken off, and they actually had to work quite diligently to get that off of the metal.
Okay. What about the hood? Anything special with this hood?
The bubble in the hood, the 3.8 SFI, sequential fuel injection turbo. You can look into this one and you can see that it's not perfectly polished in between there. Nobody's ever really detailed this car to the nines. When I own it, it won't get that way. That tells me that that sticker decal has never been taken off, put back on. They're just a special hood limited to the turbo Buicks.
Okay, so it could be GNX, it could be
yes,
T-type.
GNX, T-type, yes, limited,
Okay.
yes.
So we have painted metal bumpers, and here's where I'm kind of talking to you guys saying, hey, there's some things that you look at, and this is an 8,790 mile car. I was scared when we got to drive it. I mean, it's crazy. And you look at it and you go, well, the paint's kind of, but realistically, like you were telling me earlier, when you see this paint that's got the white on the plastics, you get excited.
I get excited because I know that that's an original filler panel. It has never been painted. I know that they didn't take them off and put the aftermarket plastic ones on there. That to me is a bonus.
So that happens on the front and on the back.
Yes.
And if you were taking this to a car show and you wanted it to look nice, what would you do?
Polish it up, it goes right away.
So that's just something that comes through and you can take it off. Maybe a quick detailer spray, something like that,
Yes.
takes it right down.
Yep.
Okay. As far as anything else, as far as paint goes, is there anything other that's quirky?
Yes. On the B pillar, where they put the top on the cars, the A pillar is usually pretty smooth. The B pillar is where you can notice a lot of the stress, a lot of the lead that they put in. If you feel that it's not smooth, they put the top on right there, and this always looks a little imperfect.
Okay. So around this window, and I know, like, if you're saying if this car was actually painted, if somebody wanted to come in and say, hey, how do I tell if something was painted? Where's the first place we'll look?
The first place that I look is the opera glass. When these cars were painted under warranty, when they were painted by GM dealers, they were guys in the collision shop, and they didn't go through the headache of removing all the interior panels, pulling the 4 bolts out, taking the RTV off, and pulling this out. So if this is smooth around here, that's one of my first clues that the car hasn't been painted. They ran a line of tape, and then they painted it, and they peeled the line back, so you can generally feel where the tape line is on the windows of the car.
And if they did the doors, you could feel it in the doors.
Yep, on the inside of the door jams,
hood.
on the edge up there, yes.
Okay, trunk, all that stuff.
Yes, every jam in the car
Gotcha.
should be smooth.
Obviously, when you're looking at one of these, you're going to crawl underneath. Is there anything super important to know about the bottom of this car?
Not anything super important on the Grand Nationals. They're basically a Buick frame. They have a special rear end. They got a 10-bolt, 8-inch, 342 gear in them. So you got to count the bolts on the back of the pumpkin. A big thing everybody does, sticks their finger in there. Hey, there's no Bondo.
Inside the wheel well?
Inside of the wheel well. So if you look at the edge of the wheel well, the trim is extremely hard to come by. Nice, good trim is extremely hard to come by. If you look at just the sweep of the wheel well, in the back bottom corner on both the quarters and the front of the bottom on the quarter, you'll see how clean the car is, if there's any mud in there, if it's debris built up in there, any kind of road stuff is in there. That stuff will all hold moisture, and that
Rust.
yeah, that pushes the rust. A lot of the cars behind the front wheel, the frame buckles out, and you can see on this one, and I think this one has been painted because you can't see it, but right here, a lot of frames get rusty right there.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's what's getting pounded with stones all the time.
Exactly, if they don't have mud flaps.
Gotcha.
This car was driven down a sand road, so there is sand underneath it. I've never bottom blasted the car, but the car underneath is spectacular.
Oh, it's beautiful underneath. The rear end on this, what I noticed is completely almost rust-free compared to most of what you see in the 80s.
Yeah.
Which seems odd. Totally clean, obviously 8,000 mile car, but that's what you're looking for if you want to get a very clean car. So, beyond paint, what's the second most important thing that we're going to look at?
The second most important thing is the ID label in the trunk.
Okay, so this trunk tag is on a lot of cars, but it's not on every one because obviously you repainted it, trunk's been replaced, it's not there.
Yep.
What's important on this trunk tag?
This will tell you, first of all, the VIN. Look for the end of the VIN. The VIN will match the VIN on the car. Then this tells you all the options, all the equipment. CC1 is T-tops. The rear end, if it's a posi or not a posi. Power windows, power locks. This will just tell you that it is a Grand National. It is this car with these options.
Is that the only way you can tell that this is for sure a Grand National?
That's one of a very few that you
Okay.
can tell. You can clone anything to make it look really well, and there's some guys that are cloning these now. There are some that are going really far and making them so you can't tell. And then there's guys, recently on one of the TV shows, a gentleman bought a Grand National that had a blue interior. Well, it was a T that somebody painted black. Throughout the course of the show, they found out that it was just a plain Regal that somebody threw a turbo engine in. But he was paying 13 grand for the car, didn't care about this, he was using it
Is
just
what
to
it was.
drive.
So that's going to be something that's very interesting. Is there any options on there that you should look for a collector? Just whatever you want?
Whatever you want, personal preference. I like the cars loaded up. I like the T-tops. A lot of guys want a hard top. The moonroof cars are very rare. They didn't build a lot of them. ASC built the Mooners for GM, and I had one of those cars I sold. Personal preference, I like the T-tops better. If I'm going to drive the car, I want the air. I want that experience.
Okay. So inside the trunk, anything else we should look for besides that tag?
I would just say the overall cleanliness of everything. I mean, if you look at how this thing shines, and this car has not been detailed in quite some time, just look at the ridges, look at the paint, look at the edges of everything. It's all crisp. How nice the paint is on the hinges, the solenoid to pop the trunk, the bolts that actually hold the solenoid in. All these little things make a car that much better to me. Something as simple as on the side of the hinges. If you look at your bolts over there, Brian, you'll see they're absolutely perfect.
Right.
Wrench has never been on them.
Exactly.
That's from the factory.
Okay, so then bringing something else up inside, this spare tire here, for an 8,000 mile car has some rust on it.
And I can't tell you why. Majority of the cars that I see that are absolutely nice, a lot of them will have some discoloration, some hinge of rust. I don't know what to explain it. Maybe a viewer can cue us into that. So next, let's move on to the engine.
Okay, so everyone's going to want to see under this hood. Obviously, it's a huge thing to have this Buick turbocharged with the 6 logo on here, right?
Yes.
That's something that most people want to see. This is nice and clean. I've seen a lot of these that are not very clean. Being clean, does it scare you? No,
that tells you how the car was treated, how it was driven.
Okay.
There's not a lot of stuff flying off the serpentine belt going up and hitting the insulation. It's a good non-driven car.
Okay, what are we looking for in here?
A lot of things. One of the biggest things to me, I have the shield off the turbo. And I did that to show you the oil feed line and that there's never been a wrench on that. It's never been on and off. It's from the factory. The turbos to these cars, a lot of them were changed. They had a different downpipe, a bigger 3-inch downpipe put on them. They had a different wastegate put on them. I took that off so you can see that it is the original turbo that came with the car. And I believe years down the road, that will be dollars.
And I can see these cars were fast cars, so if somebody wanted to make some horsepower with it, there were easy modifications to do, just like today.
Yeah, very
But those
easy.
modifications take away from the value of this car.
Personally, to me, I like an original car. So this has the original coil pack. It has the original air intake hose. This car is completely original underneath the hood. There's nothing that's been modified. It's got the factory headers. It's a completely stock car. There's no modifications to this car.
So when they're looking underneath here, what obviously are they looking for other than you're going to want to remove that shield, look at the turbo, see if anything's been messed with. Pretty easy to see if any of those bolts have been moved around.
Yes.
Is there anything else? Oil leaks? I mean, in this year, did these things leak oil?
They have a rear main that leaks oil.
So nothing up front?
Nothing,
So
it's all down below in the car. And there's a 2-piece neoprene seal, and there might be something newer to the market that I'm unaware of, but they do leak oil.
So, but that's from the rear, nothing
Yes.
from the front? No turbo oil leaks are normal, nothing up here is normal to leak oil?
If the car's good, no. If it's an older car that's sat, the valve cover gaskets, you can leak oil. If your turbo hoses aren't good, I don't know how to say this, but the lack of any discoloration other than what's on the motor. You can't see where there's been any oil coming out of the valve cover, the oil fill. It's a clean car, it's a pure car.
Yeah, I can see this one's nice.
The one thing that they'll look for, the first clue, this hose will have a big cone-shaped filter, and they'll do away with the original inlet, the original filter compartment, and that'll be the first thing to tell you that they're trying to modify the car. And that's not a big deal to some people, but it is to others.
Okay. So another thing to look at when you open the hood, I see that there's a sticker here. What's the sticker?
That says that a recall was done by a Buick dealer, the date that it was done, the parade that it was, that's the number of the campaign.
Were there a lot of recalls on these cars?
Not too many of them, and I'm unsure of what that one was.
Okay, so while you're going through here, obviously looking at stickers and the stickers being in good condition is perfect for a collector, right?
Yes.
It also tells you that it's factory stuff.
Yes.
Not been replaced by an AutoZone part.
Right, correct.
What do you think we should look at next?
Let's look at the interior.
Okay, so what interior colors were available for these cars?
Grand Nationals, you could only get them black and gray.
And they all had that
Turbo 6
insignia.
Yep.
Okay, so I noticed when I was getting in and out of this car earlier, it said concert sound on the bottom, which is not something I seen back in the 80s, to be honest.
It's an option. It's one of the options that you can put on the car. The concert sound, the power windows, the power locks, tilt column. This is back in the day when you could literally check a box to get an option on a car. There's a lot of these cars that are equipped well, and then there's a lot of them that aren't, and then there's a lot of them in between. This car has, I want to say, almost every option you could put on this car.
So a dead giveaway for something that's not a Grand National would mean that obviously there's a digital tack and
Yes.
a digital boost gauge. If it didn't have that,
Not a Grand National.
okay, did the T-types have that also?
Yes.
Okay, so that could be swapped around.
That was put on every turbo car. The boost gauge, the electronic boost gauge, and the electronic tacks was every car.
Is there anything else in here that would just throw you to, boom, this was a T-type converted over? Steering wheel, anything?
The center cap on the steering wheel, but there's nothing that I can say would alert you instantly if the guy who was converting it ordered the right parts. You could pretty much make a clone, and a lot of people wouldn't know.
Gotcha. So the interior on this one is spotless. I mean,
Yes.
all these G bodies have the body by Fisher on the bottom. And I can remember when I had my Monte Carlo back in the day, those things got beat up really quick.
Yep.
They were kind of like a polished aluminum, but your feet tended to drag over them quickly.
Yep.
So look for the clean stuff there. Look that those haven't been pulled out in rust underneath.
Right. Rust underneath, rust on the bolts. This car does not have power seat. That didn't matter to me. Once I seen the car, I was going to buy it anyways. That's one of the things this car is missing. That's a personal preference too. They also put a digital dash. You could order this with a completely digital dash. This happens to be an analog dash. The digital dash had a digital display for everything. Your speed, your fuel, everything was digital. In 1986, they had a digital climate control. I don't like them personally, and there's not a lot of cars with them, so they're rare, but they were trying to get that futuristic.
Are they worth more?
They're a little bit rare, and I know guys will pay up for them. It doesn't matter to me if it has it or doesn't have it.
So if you're really looking at a Grand National, what's the next most important thing to look at?
Let's look at the wheels and the tires and the center caps.
Okay, so Grand National wheels.
Yep.
What should we look for?
They're a steel wheel. They've been chromed. If they sit out, if they do not get attention, if they don't get the proper care, the chrome will start to pit, start to rust. If there's a lot of brake dust on them that doesn't get cleaned off, inside of all the grooves, it'll start to rust. Where they have the wheel weights on the cars.
Did they put the wheel weights on the outside of these?
Either way.
Some did, some
Some
didn't.
did, some didn't. The centers, the black and the fins, they were never perfect from GM, but that fades over time. Lack of care, the paint will deteriorate and fall apart. The center cap, inside the center of the wheel, the lug nuts, there's just a lot of little things to look for that let you know it's the right stuff. This is the correct lug nut, it's a correct center cap. That's how a nice wheel and tire should look. White letter Eagle GTs, that was an option also.
What was the standard tire? Black letter?
Yeah, it could be black or a white letter.
Okay. So obviously behind these rims also comes some brakes. You know, this is a go fast car. Is there anything special about the brakes in this compared to a standard Cutlass?
Yes, standard Cutlass, standard Buick, they had a master cylinder. This was operated by the vacuum in this little canister right there. That little ball takes and makes the pressure that that big master cylinder used to make. They go bad from time to time. A lot of guys converted their cars. This car, if you noticed it when you drove it, when you first touched the brake, the red light came on. That means that I might have to get another booster ball to put on the side of that thing. But it's exclusive to the turbo Buicks, all turbo Buicks.
Okay. And the other thing that I really noticed a little bit more, and actually stood out when I drove this car, realistically, man, this is a 700 R4.
Yes.
So I've been in a lot of Monte Carlos, a lot of Monte Carlo SSs, and you've had the ones that have the solenoid stick in your torque conversion gauge, but this one really seems like it has a shift kit, and that was my first question, right? Is that factory?
Special valve body to this car, yes.
So when you get in and drive one and it gives you that hard shift, either even into drive or first to second,
Yep.
standard,
Completely
normal.
stock, yes.
And if it's slushy,
If it's slushy, that means it might not be the right valve body. The car might be pretty abused. But it's a pretty crisp, it sets you back in your seat. It barks the tires.
So that's something to look for. Obviously, if
Yes.
it doesn't do it, you could have.
Who knows?
I chuckle because back in the 80s, I mean, this is a cable-driven speedometer. If
Yeah.
somebody really wanted to, they could have unscrewed that.
Yep.
And your 8,000 miles could be 80,000. It could be 800,000 miles.
It could be.
So this is something all the kind of when you're bringing this together as to what do I have for a car? This is it. So there's a lot of little things like brakes. And when you get into some of the intercooled cars, there's a little bit different in the front fascia, right?
Yes.
It's just a spoiler that pushes air to the center.
Yep.
And then your intercooler is directly in the center of the car. And what blew my mind on this is that you had an electric fan.
Yep.
So obviously that's a big thing.
If you shut the car off and it's hot, back in the day, people would still think the car is still running because it would be blowing air onto the motor. And you could walk away from the car and you'd hear the whine from the electric fan and people would tell you that your car's still running. So that's kind of a neat thing too.
Yeah, in the 80s it was different. So there's a tag on your intercooler and that's obviously aluminum, so those could corrode and rust if they're bad. But other than that, there's a lot of things to look for on these cars.
Yes.
And a lot of little different things. So when you're inspecting the car, it's an inspection front to back. You're looking for any small detail that you can find. Nuts, bolts that have been used, not been moved, everything's set. Any other weird things on the interior or outside?
I guess I would just look at the car as a whole and just, I can tell if a car's been kind of put together or not. Just look at the car, look at the condition, look at the body panels. The car should look like a decent car, and I guess that's not a good way to say it, but the car should look like it's all together.
So what if one's got 60,000 miles on it? Is there anything you should look at and be like, hey?
If it had 60,000 miles, I'd automatically look at where I showed you on the roof. That'll tell you how the car's been flexed if it's been driven hard. I would drive the car to see how the transmission shifts. Not all of these cars came with a posi. That's a big deal to some guys.
Well, yeah, from our ride, I mean, obviously that would just burn tires forever.
Yes, exactly.
At that point, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so T-tops leak like any standard 80s car?
Every car with a T-top leaks. I don't care what anybody says, they all leak.
They all leak, okay. And is there anything on the visors? I know some people like stickers and there's not. Is there anything that just kind of stands out as Grand National?
There's a sticker that they put on the visor that some people are diehard about that it has to have, and it just tells you the oil changes, how you're driving a turbo car. It's an explanation of the turbo and the car that you're driving that has it, and how you change the oil, maintain it. You can buy those aftermarket like you can buy everything. I don't put a lot of validation in a visor on a car. I would rather look at the structural integrity, the integrity of how it drives, everything else. A visor means very little to me.
Right, you're talking, yeah, I get it with someone dead set. This is an awesome tour. First, this is an awesome car.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, it's cool to look back at some of these. It brings back a lot of memories. And I hope this brings back a lot of memories for you guys too. And if you're out looking to buy some of these memories, this is a cool car to have. I want to thank you a lot for walking us through your cars. You got an awesome place here. I hope we can do this again.
Thank you.
So guys, if you have any questions, I'll be in touch with Steve. You can leave them below. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. Give us a like in this video. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.